Hello everyone, welcome to the GeoEcologist. I am Dr. Krishnanand and you have been watching my videos on several topics related to geography and also related to research methodology on my channel. In this session on economic geography, we are going to learn about a very interesting topic related to one of the most important challenges in today's world, that is famine. So, what is famine? How is it related to food security? And what are its various factors, causes, and also the remedial measures of this food insecurity and relating famine across the world? That is what we are going to discuss here in today's session. But before we go ahead, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and do share the videos with others as well. So now let's understand the famine, its causes, effects and remedies in this session. Now, first of all, what is famine in simple way? It is basically an acute episode of extreme hunger. Now remember, in the last sessions we talked about the food security, also about insecurities across the world and several factors related to it, and also nutrition security. Now this is linked to this particular concept of that when there is extreme hunger in the society, when at a given point the mortality rate due to starvation is at its peak, that situation is called a famine situation. So the most important point, if you observe here, is the hunger induced diseases and mortality, which is the pivot area for this situation of famine. Now if you observe the characteristics of the famine, very common characteristics are the severe food shortage, and they may be triggered because of a variety of factors. For example, conflicts, political instability, drought situation, crop failure, demographic disequilibrium, and also governmental policies at many times. That is one thing that several factors contribute to. Then widespread death due to several diseases, and we already know we are facing pandemic right now. So diseases, starvation, scarcity of food, this is one common factor. Then malnutrition and other deficiency disease also lead to the plaguing a huge amount of population. That's very important. And crop failure, nationwide crop failure, if happens, then there is obviously a famine situation. And poverty with various social disorganization, which means that people do not have affordability at the same time. People are so poor that they cannot buy food, right? So this is something which is commonly the major characteristics of a famine, right? In a given space and time, if the famine situation is there, it means they will have all of these characteristics or at least few of them definitely, right? Now let's look into this historical journey of the famine and famine victims worldwide since 1860s. The data is given from ourworldindata.org. Now if you look into this data, there are several towers here, and here is the timeline. If you observe the 1860s and 70s, again the huge, more than 20 million people were affected during this time period, and then it slips down and then again rises up when in 1920s, the Great Famine again, right? So in 1920s, millions of families, especially in Soviet Union and China, died due to famine. Then if you observe here, in between, in 1930s, it continued in Soviet Union and across European side. Then further, if you observe in this 1940s, now 1940s, the famine comes to majorly into Europe and Asia. So Asia, because of the World War II and millions of people die in Europe and Asia, and several other political instability factors lead to this famine in Asia. Then further, there is a decline here in 50s, but again a huge rise that is called Great Leap Forward. And remember, Great Leap Forward in China was related to this. So this Great Leap Forward is related to the Mao's policy, where they wanted to increase the production of industries and did not pay attention to agricultural sector. So because of this Great Leap Forward in economy, what happened was the agricultural sector, the food production was suffering, and that's where these 1960s turn up. And then gradually, after the advent of Green Revolution, new variety of seeds, what you see is gradually the famine levels going down. But going down still, it's more than 4 million if you observe. So going down does not mean that it ended. The data itself tells you about 4, 2, 2.5. So this is continuing, and we are in the current state in 21st century that we are observing. Now, according to UN World Food Program, famine is declared in particular situations when malnutrition is widespread, when people have started dying of starvation through the lack of access to sufficient and nutritious food. Then it is considered officially as a famine situation. So integrated food security phase classification criteria gives 5 phase famine of acute food insecurity occurring. And this is the criteria they have defined, that if you want to declare that this is a famine stuck state, then what are the characteristics? What is the important thing that needs to be there is at least 20% of the households in an area face extreme food shortage with a limited ability to cope. That is first criteria. Then prevalence of acute malnutrition in children exceeds 30%. Then death rate exceeds 2 people per 10,000 people per day. And declaration of a famine carries no binding obligations on UN or member states. These are certain things that is very important to understand, that at least first 3 points are the major points, that if you want to declare, if UN has to declare a famine in some country or some place, then these criteria has to be met. Now, if you observe another data, this is about world region. This is geographical pattern through continents. So what you observe? Now, Europe here, Asia here, and Africa here. Now, if you observe, the greatest famines have obviously the bigger circles representing it. So bigger circles are majorly in Asia. So Asia being the max receiver of these famine incidents across the history. Since 1850 till 2016, what you observe, that majorly Asia has been affected. Also during this 1920s, 30s and 40s, Europe was majorly affected due to wars, political instability majorly. But Africa of late is now on rising trend. So in almost 21st century, maximum incidence of famine is found in African countries. So in 19th and 20th century, if you observe, the Southeast and South Asia as well as Eastern and Central Europe were having the most number of deaths because of famine. Since 2010, what has changed? Africa has been the most affected continent in the world. And remember this, on June 22nd, 2021, the latest one, the food program warned that 41 million were on the brink of famine across 43 countries. That means 584,000 were already experiencing famine-like conditions. Where? In African countries, Ethiopia, Madagascar, South Sudan, Yemen. These are the places. So you can locate them on the map of the world where famine is currently persisting, right? So if you look at here now, the victims also by continent since 1860s, who have been the victims, where people died the most? Obviously, Asia, which is here in this orangish color, you'll find the maximum. Europe, that is there in the yellowish mustard color that you can see here, is during only particular time period that gives you here. But now there is a trend of Africa which is dominating as you go ahead, early 2000s and now. So now the entire famine is located mostly in Africa and sub-Saharan Africa, that you can observe through geographical patterns. Now, what are the causes of famine? The causes of famine could be understood by these basic 7 points. So climate uncertainty, variability, and also society's dependency on the primary activities. So if there is a failure because of some climate anomaly, excess rainfall or excess drought condition, it means it is related to climate. Then drought and floods, very common across the world, not just in India. Across the world, drought situation and flood situation is being now extreme. That's what we are looking into. So climatic anomaly again leading it to the further drought, meteorological drought and also socio-economic drought at the same time, if you remember the definitions. And poverty, population, resource, these 3 things. Remember this PPR relationship. Now poverty, population and resource relationship is again talking about 3 things. Remember, accessibility, availability and affordability of the food. This is done through PPR linkages. If there is no healthy linkage in PPR, that is population, poverty and resource, it means there is going to be a problem of famine, right? Lack of government's effort to transform agriculture. So if there is a traditional agriculture but the demand has increased multifold, remember Malthusian theory of population? That population is growing equationally, right? But what is happening to the food? Food is growing arithmetically. So that's the problem here again. Now food politics is involved because of economics around the food, organic food and organic market and several other suppliers, political bargaining, international aids, and so many things are happening across the food sector, right? Then comes the social factors related to it, especially famine being one of the socio-economic problems, especially in South Asia, if you observe, in the words of Amartya Sen, the great Nobel laureate. Now according to FAO, also, food security and famine is linked to the economic classes and also to some extent the various castes in India as well. This is also observed in FAO data. In part, the SCs and STs are the worst sufferer groups that is quoted by FAO in its report, right? So what you observe, those are the landless classes in India, landless people, right? Most of the times either they work on others' land or they remain landless and they do not have anything to work for. So what happens? Extreme poverty, and there is no purchasing power there. So extreme poverty, then extreme hunger is connected to it. So that's where famine-like situation comes in. And then the public distribution system, which is not effective. It has a lot of problems. Every day in news and report, you can find out that PDS system is not working, not just in India, but across the world. The distribution chains are having problem. And that's because of corruption. So it becomes more of socio-economic problem, right? That's where you observe that nature as well as cultural, both the factors are related to famine situation. It's not just about climate change, but also about human beings, right? So that's where it needs to be observed. Now, what are the consequences of famine? If you observe famine, the consequences are very clear. What are these? High death of women and children. Then death of animals and plants, that is flora and fauna also. Then spread of disease due to weak immune system. Currently we are facing it during pandemic. We have seen across the world the global pattern of immune system if you observe. Then social tensions due to food and water shortage. So if there is a scarcity, it means there will be a civil war like situation. Extreme fight for food and water, right? That's in some countries you can observe where there is scarcity. So scarcity would lead to the social tensions as well. Then disbalance of sex ratio, no human development, low fertility rate, and several others. Now these are certain things which are of different natures if you observe, which are having the consequences on various aspects, not just on human being, but also on the animals and plants. The entire ecosystem is going to be affected if there is a persistence of famine-like situation across the world. That's why we need to look into the security side, the sustainability side. That's very important. Now if you observe the Indian context, let's look into a little of India, how we have looked into famine historically, because India is a developing nation. As we already know, we are growing nations, and majorly since ancient time we have been dependent on agriculture. Industrialization is very new to us, not even just 100 years if you observe, right? So what happens here? The rainfall, that is monsoon dependent agriculture, we already know about it. We have discussed in climatology lectures as well. So lack of rainfall sometimes and excessive rainfall, both of the situation leads to the famine like situation in India. Now if you observe this historically, 1943 the Great Bengal famine, right? Then we have 1783 the Chalisa famine, then 1770 again the Great Bengal famine, 1791 Skull famine, then 1866 Odisha famine, then famine of 1630 in Deccan, right? Now the Odisha is this one, right? Not Odisha, earlier it was called like that. And famine of 1873 is Deccan, 1837 is Agra. So if you observe the major historical famines we observed is here, and which had the major reasons. One of the major reasons if you observe is the political issues related to the colonialism in India. The policy of taking food away from India, especially the 1943 Bengal famine, very famous that in World War II, Britain took away the supply, and Winston Churchill is famously known for this, right? So if you don't know the history, please go and learn about it in history, that what happened in 1940s, why there was a severe shortage of food in Bengal province, right? So most serious of all these famines were the 1770, 1791, 1783, where so many million deaths occurred. And latest one we see is 1943, right? Also we had certain famine-like situations in 1960s as well, where we had to adopt the Green Revolution policies finally to overcome. That we already know, right? So remedies for famine problem. What are the challenges and what are the remedies is just two sides of the same coin. If you know the challenges, remedies are related to the same. Right. So agricultural development, obviously, because we need production strengthening, right? And agricultural development does not mean that simply produce more food, but what kind of food are we producing? Is it nutritious as well? So not just quantity of food, but also at the same time, quality side, right? Then alternate economy is very important, because if we don't have diversification of economy, there is no purchasing power, employment, poverty, resource relationship, all these things are important. So we need to work in the all sectors if we want the security, that if we don't want famine to come into the society, remember we need to look into it. So first it was emphasized in British time, 1863 Famine Commission report of India, that agricultural development and revival of old canal, water harvesting structures should be made mandatory. So these are the things where irrigation facilities or land degradation should be reduced, and also looking into the alternative economies. That's where people will be strengthened, right? People will have more strength to buy food for themselves. So affordability as well, availability as well, and also the accessibility. Again, the 3A comes in the picture. And to provide relief operations for immediate help to suffering groups, international trade of food, and also the rationality and looking into the hunger index and working onto it. That global hunger is having the socio-economic and political three major factors where we need to work out. So the stability in the social sector, stability in the economic sector, and stability in the political sector is the most important pivot areas if we want to become food secure and if we want to solve the situation of famine across the world. And then further, we already know the problem of PDS system. So remember, China has done really well. It was in news that China has the most efficient PDS system. So we also need to improve, the world needs to improve on the distribution system that we already know. International cooperation on forecasting of natural hazards like flood, drought situation. This could be done, right? We are doing really well in our space science. So more of monitoring, more of real time news to the farmers. And also remember, it's very important to understand the erratic monsoon and availability of rainfall and water harvesting integrated together, because the problem is that different departments are working differently. They're not integrated. So information from all the department needs to be coming to a table where it could be given to the farmers who are producers of the food. That's where information technology could help. Digital India campaign could help, right? And population control measures obviously is needed. And then there are certain things like literacy, education development. UNICEF, World Bank, NGOs are taking active participation, Red Cross Society and all, right? So they have to make people aware about it. They have to educate people, and also the strengthening in education sector is needed if we want to overcome the situation of famine in future. And the other remedies may include these: relief policy, maintenance of buffer stock, then pro-agroclimatic planning, use of modern scientific methods, and also the integration of remote sensing and GIS to the accuracy, right? Where the future prediction is also possible, or at least trend analysis is possible, so that people have a sense of the security where food and famine is concerned in India, right? Now, at the end, what is important is the way forward. That is there a risk for future famine? Yes, of course. So if you remember the report of Guardian in 2007, they said 40% of the world agricultural land is seriously degraded. It means a huge problem. Africa and other continents are suffering. Mostly 25% of population is famished by 2025. They reported in 2007. And that's what is happening right now. So COVID-19 pandemic, we already know that because of lockdowns and restrictions, prevented the movement of aid and greatly impacted food production as well. Now, as a result, what is happening in several pockets across the world, there is famine-like situation, right? So, biblical proportions or hunger pandemic is reported by UN. That's where the crisis situation is. This is called food crisis. And in conjunction with 2019 and 2020 locust infestations, if you remember, locust attack and several ongoing armed conflicts across the world, we have seen worst famines and are going to see worst famine in future as well. So remember, affecting between 10 to 20% of global population, the Great Chinese Famine was one of the examples. And also in future, it's impending that if we increase on population, we don't look into the proper connectivity or linkages between the population, poverty and resource relationship, the famine is going to be there. So now, when we have discussed the various aspects of famine, its causes, effects and remedies, in the sessions to come, we'll be talking more on several other topics related to economic geography. So stay tuned, stay safe, keep watching and learning, and don't forget to share the videos with others as well.